fear and horror are an appropriate response.
Which I know very well, so I've lived in London most of my grown-up life.
I think he should apologise.
There is no other reason to be given why you have not gone to hell since you have sat here. O sinner, consider the fearful danger you are in. You hang by a slender thread with the flames of divine wrath flashing about it, ready every moment to singe it. Nothing that you can do to induce God to spare you one moment.
Which I know very well, so I've lived in London most of my grown-up life.
And I think he just continues to incite hatred and prejudice, and I think he should apologise.
This is a journey into a lunatic asylum.
We're going to have to do more than talk. We're going to have to do more than listen. We're going to even have to do more than learn. We're going to have to start practicing, and that's very hard. We're going to have to start getting out there with the people. And a lot of times we think we're better than the people, but that's an insult and that's criminal.
Ghulam Taslim Ali, who is only 17, is an imam. He deputizes for his father, who is away on pilgrimage to Mecca.
This is the Holy Quran, and it's the first surah, and it's a very difficult kind of, it needs a lot of pronunciation to read it, and a lot of concentration, and I studied 7 years of this in Cardiff, actually, with some Arab people.
Prejudice begins from the very earliest ages, when one is first beginning to learn to understand. I know even in nursery rhymes one often has this feeling. We have a nursery rhyme in England which is, Taffy was a Welshman, Taffy was a thief. And I go around thinking all Welshmen are thieves, which is completely wrong.
What's the origin of your prejudice against Muslims, Gopi, do you know?
Well, I think perhaps it was something that happened in my childhood. I had a very strict Muslim teacher who used to use the cane very frequently, and no amount of pleading, no amount of protestations of innocence would change his mind. And I think that's why I've generalized from one instance, and now I've got a rooted belief that all Muslims are hard and merciless.
It's all too easy to focus on difference to generate a sense of grievance for political gain, and I think we all recognise that. But I believe that what unites us as British citizens is far greater than what divides.
And I was thinking the other day, perhaps prejudice is a little bit like a glass of water. And if you had a large glass of water and dropped little drops of pink water into it, and you just looked at the glass of water, it would look the same.
Because of the numbers. If the numbers were small, then of course, like any very small minority, they would filter into the population. But nobody seriously imagines that if 2/5 of Birmingham consists of a first generation of descendants born here, of people from the West Indies, from Africa, and from Asia, there will not be a profound difference between that part of the population and the rest.
But if you suddenly held it up against a broad sheet of white paper, then you would realize that that water was painted pink from all those little drops that you had been dropping into it. And I know that these last 17 years I've had those little drops of prejudice being dropped into me. And now that I'm in the Forum group and I'm with India, Pakistan, Philippines and all the others, I realize how wrong my prejudices were.
I want us to live in a country where a person is judged not by the colour of their skin, but by the content of their character. And that goal is very much more within our reach than it was when I was a child in the 60s and 70s.
I too have been blinded by centuries-old prejudices. The good qualities of Hindus have no significance to me. I think it was during the times of partition when I saw all the bloodshed and the misery that we experienced. It was from that I experienced this prejudice, and it is very deep-rooted.
So for me, when it comes to black history, it's not about segregating communities. It's not about the racist, dehumanising, infantilising politics of identity. It's about recognising different histories and embracing our common humanity as equal citizens today.
Tell us, excuse me, Sarah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to think that perhaps in the stories, too, that one is taught, one tends to get this feeling of prejudice. For instance, in religion, I always feel that Christ was English.
and also I went over to Saudi Arabia and also learned some of the methods. It's very hard to catch it up. It takes a lot of practice, and these children all here are learning it in stages. Like this young chap, he's learning the startings of the alphabet and so on.
And I cannot imagine him as being Armenian or as a Jew. And there's just been a painting that's been shown of Christ as a Negro, which to me seems repulsive.
With a solid adherence to our values, our culture will continue its subtle evolution. Consensual integration will arise on the gentle currents of a myriad of individual free choices. So let's celebrate the rich and evolving nature of our great nation. Let's celebrate those people of various heritage who have made it in mainstream life in Britain, many of us in this chamber today.
And then again, in these stories that we have of the Knights of the Round Table and of all great people, I always seem to think that they're English, and aren't I lucky to be an English person because it's so nice.
Well, that's extremely interesting.
Mr. Ali used to kill chickens in his flat for his own use. But now the increase of Pakistanis in his neighborhood has made it possible for him to turn this into a business.
Because I've noticed that most Englishmen think that history began with the signing of the Magna Carta.
Yeah.
It might be of some interest to you to know that history began some 3,000 years before that in the river valleys of the Indus, when your savage Anglo-Saxons were still running about dressed in skins. And it's also an interesting fact that my country, in the prejudices which my friend Amin has pointed out as the caste system, originated in part from a decadent civilization.
Shah Jahan is a law student at Lincoln's Inn and secretary of the Pakistani Welfare Association.
That if somebody is in need of help, or he is buying one house, or he is starting a business of his own, we really help them, and the community and the members of the community help them very much. In Pakistan Welfare Association, we have near about more than 3,000 members. As you possibly know, that many of our members can't speak English.
The ancient Hindu civilization had become decadent, and realizing well the faults which lay inside themselves, they threw up these race barriers, and this was the beginning of the caste system. But I must say, as far as intolerance is concerned, the Muslim surely has few parallels in history.
So we felt the necessity of organizing us into some sort of organization where we can help our members in various aspects of their life, the problems they face here, and the dealings with local authorities, Ministry of Pension and National Insurance, income tax authorities, sometimes to their employers, trade unions, and all the rest of it. And we also try to find out accommodation for our members, and supposing one of our members wants to buy some house or flat, we try to negotiate or try to help them in getting the mortgages and things like that.
That we come to a very strange question, because our religion totally prohibits intolerance. In fact, Quran says that there is no compulsion in religion. We believe in absolute freedom.
Another white journalist from UK who was taken as a hostage.
And judging from what has been happening in Kashmir, I have the impression that you deny human rights, the basic freedom of opinion which you talk so much about, and that has, of course, I may be wrong, but that has what has deep-seated this prejudice of mine.
It is necessary for every Muslim, from the religious point of view, to visit Mecca at least once in his life, provided he can afford it.
In an attempt to win over the youth voter.
And while we are in Great Britain, we can save money to afford to go over there.
The leaders are no different, are they? David Cameron and Ed Miliband. They're about as different as two rats fighting over a courgette that has fallen into a urinal.
And there's no other, nothing else to, what you call it, which doesn't allow us to go there. We can go at any time. And while we are in Pakistan, there are so many difficulties to reach Mecca. because the government over there doesn't allow everybody to reach Mecca.
And the Taliban only requested her when they released her that you promise us that you'll read the Quran.
And as to the point of view, as the Quran says that you should never force your religion upon anyone.
And when she was released, she openly praised the Taliban.
It might be of interest for you to know that in the Muslim kings who ruled India for about 5-6 centuries imposed certain taxes on those who were non-Hindus. They also, the invasions from the north were from Muslim countries was with a view to forcible conversion. And I'm sure that the example that the Muslims have set in intolerance is not restricted to India alone.
Whether it be France, whether it be other countries, whether it be European countries.
From Libya, you come to Syria, to Iraq, to Afghanistan, to Somalia. I mean,
from China all the way to Spain, under the Ottoman Caliphate, the Abbasid, the Umayyad Caliphate, it has happened in the past.
So there is a serious political problem in the Muslim world.
By the Taliban in Afghanistan.
Just a second. Don't you know the history of the Mughal period when King Akbar, who was so tolerant towards the Hindus that he even married Hindu women, and he had all the Hindus in his ministry, and the whole country was going on all right.
Whereas the Labour Party, when they announced their support for welfare cuts, they did so with all the confidence of a dog running away from the smell of his own farts.
We're very grateful for the efficient way in which you have got the count through somewhat earlier than on the last occasion, and also grateful to those who spent the entire day in the polling booths.
It is crucial that we take a more honest look at ourselves and the life path that our deceptions have led us down. While most of us have spent years, if not decades, relying on our many self-deceptions, it is still within our ability to break down our false self.
I became the hero of 90% of the people of this country for having said what they were waiting for somebody to say, for identifying a danger of which they were conscious but couldn't believe that nobody would see it or point it out. And I still am.
And you still are.
If certain people have made mistakes, it's not the fault of the religion or anything.
Precisely.
But the immigration was not inevitable. This was due to a state of the law of this country, to which there is no parallel in any other country. This was due to the government of this country, and I take my share of the blame for it, deferring for too long to bring the law of this country into accord with reality.
For if our self-deceptions become too flaunting of reality, we become akin to an individual walking over a deep chasm on a poorly constructed bridge. The chasm was life itself, wrote Leo Tolstoy in his book Anna Karenina. The bridge, that artificial life. While the bridge of our self-deceptions may hold for many years, we always face the risk that the bridge will break, and we will be forced to confront the chasm of life, which after years of lying to ourselves and denying, rather than dealing with our weaknesses, we will be ill-equipped to cope with.
Would the Honourable Member not agree that indeed the intensive care beds are filled today with COVID-19 patients from African, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds and is back at levels that had been during the first peak, despite earlier pledges from the government to learn lessons and protect the vulnerable? What we need is change now.
I really do urge people not to make interventions because it's going to prevent other people from speaking. Cool.
I'll say this. It's messed up. It's so messed up that men assume you're bad at math just because you're a retard.
And it's not easy, and it's uncomfortable, and there might be bad things that are going to happen. There's going to be racism, there's going to be homophobia, there's going to be all of that kind of stuff. But as a black queer woman, my entire activist life is essentially working with people that are going to piss me off at some point. They're going to say something racist, they're going to say something sexist, they're going to say something homophobic. I'm having to constantly sort of navigate that, but I'm always focused on what is our job here. Our job as socialists is to try and sort of bring people people with us. We're supposed to be here for the working class, and that doesn't just mean us in our little radical circles. It's actually more powerful than just getting on a soapbox and speaking to people that are already going to agree with you. They're going to agree with you, so what? Let's go and try and speak to people that don't agree with us.
Schools are quickly becoming a place where promoting activism is actually more important than promoting education.
Being patriotic, of course, can count for extremism today. Terrorism, too, seems to embrace a lot of activities which were once perfectly lawful.
When he came to himself and he found black faces everywhere, black nurses and black doctors, and he was surprised. He said, "Oh gosh, where am I? Which country is this?" So I think it's just a joke, but this again is a very revealing joke. It tells you how much dependent your hospital system is on Pakistanis and Indians.
I'm not interested in laughs. What I'm aiming for is a temporary mass liberal consensus.
There are many instances in every life where one's self-deceptions begin to falter, presenting an opportunity to break down the false self. A process which, while difficult, is extremely beneficial in the long run. However, at such times, faced with the terrifying prospect that one's character was in many ways built on a lie, it is far more likely that people will flee further in the opposite direction, piling deception on deception.
Because this conclusion that the NHS is somehow structurally racist can only come from the new logic of our age. The standard form of this new logic is this. If 10% of people are characteristic X, then 10% of workers should be X, and 10% of every company should be X, and 10% of every role should be X, and 10% of every chief exec should be X.
To do this, we run to the comfort of our daily routines, busy ourselves with social concerns, accumulate more material things, and turn to the security of conformity.
And where this isn't true, it's offered as evidence of discrimination. Differences are inequalities, and the logic assumes that what is unequal must be wrong. We have seen this logic applied to sex, to gender, educational, geographical background, disabilities, and race. And now it's been applied to a virus.
So that those in authority can pretend that ordinary, law-abiding white people are as much a threat to life and limb as fanatical Islamists.
If 10% of NHS staff get COVID, then 10% of NHS staff with characteristic X should get COVID. And because that doesn't hold for BAME staff, it's viewed as evidence of racism. I'm staggered by how many intelligent people seem to have bought into this argument.
Jewish people have too much power over the government.
A significant number of British Muslims also hold attitudes towards Jews some distance away from those of the wider population.
I'm going to come out and say I'm sure within the Muslim community there is some anti-Semitism there, right? And I know that.
A fellow coworker at my job, who by the way is of color, discreetly told me that the schools seem to be pushing a very leftist agenda in class.
Anything precisely. Akbar merely is the exception that proves the rule. Akbar was the only exception to all those all those Muslim rulers. There was no other man.
As a matter of fact, most of the Mughal rulers, except the last ones, were very, very tolerant towards the Hindus. That's what I have studied in history. I don't know.
Could we leave the history a little bit and come back to present day prejudices?
Australia, New Zealand, South America, North America.
From Libya, you come to Syria, to Iraq, to Afghanistan, to Somalia.
From China all the way to Spain, under the Ottoman Caliphate, the Abbasid, the Umayyad Caliphate, it has happened in the past.
The sort of Britain that we want is a Britain where the Sharia is implemented.
How is it that we can now deny just safety?
Whether it be France, whether it be other countries, whether it be European countries.
So there is a serious political problem in the Muslim world.
If you want to change something, you have to be a part of something. You have to get involved, you have to educate yourself on it, and you have to make a change from inside. It's all good and well having opinions saying no one listens, but if you're not there to be listened to, who's going to listen?
During the war, I rested my trust in the British people. Time after time, I warned them of the dangers ahead.
On, Pakistanis and Indians.